Today, we are going to read Exodus chapter 24 and to apply its meaning into our life.
Chapter 24. Then he said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar. Moses alone shall come near to the Lord, but the others shall not come near, and the people shall not come up with him." Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice and said, "All the words that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel, who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he threw against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet as it were a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God, and ate and drank.
Identify people in your passage. First, we need to think of Moses. His name means born, or he who is drawn. His brother is Aaron the high priest, and his sister Miriam. He was called the man of God, meeting God face to face as one speaks to a friend. Exodus chapter 33 verse 11. He receives the law of God on Mount Sinai and builds a tabernacle according to God's instruction. Aaron is the first high priest, descendant of Levi, brother Moses and Miriam. Aaron was a leader of the Hebrew people during the Exodus from Egypt and during that time roaming in the wilderness. Nadab, son of Aaron, the eldest of Aaron's 4 sons and a priest. Nadab always appears with his brother Abihu. What is the nature of burnt and fellowship offering? In verse 5. Burnt offerings are typically made for atonement for sin and consecration, that is, devotion and commitment to God. Then fellowship offerings celebrate fellowship with God. Through verse 6 and verse 8, we can understand the scripture. One half of blood was sprinkled on the altar, while the other half was put in bowls and was sprinkled on the people. So, what did the blood on the altar signify? And what did the blood sprinkled on the people? The blood sprinkled on the altar symbolizes that God was the other party to the covenant with Israelite. And then we need to remember God's atonement and consecration. In fact, forgiveness of sin can be done by the blood. Hebrews chapter 9 verse 22. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Lastly, we need to remember God's approval and acceptance of the 2 offerings that Israelite had offered in verse 5. Moses sprinkled blood on the people in order to symbolize their being parties to the covenant with God. The blood was a sign that they were recipients of the advantage that the shed blood provided. First, bind people in obedience in their oath, verse 3 and 7. Second, vivid reminders. The source and nature of their forgiveness and acceptance is in God and His grace. Reading verse 9 through 11. In what sense do the men see God? God's covenant with Israel involved God as one party and the people as the other. Represented by the 74 readers, the people were the other party. The description in verse 10 is not so much of seeing God, but only of seeing His feet and what lies under them. But perhaps this is precisely the point. The leaders do not actually see God in any full sense. In this case, seeing the God of Israel probably means that they see Him in part. Never do humans actually see God fully in His essence. Exodus chapter 33, verse 20. But God allows something of a shape which could be recognized by human. The statement in verse 11, but God did not raise His hand against these readers, reflects the widespread assumption in the ancient world that to see God would be to die. God showed Himself even though only vaguely and partially, so that the leaders would understand that He was a willing party to His covenant with them, and so that they would remember that they had agreed to keep His covenant in His actual, unmistakable presence. What does it signify that 74 readers of Israel ate and drink? And they ate and drank. It's a summation of the covenant meal. In the ancient biblical world, covenants were normally concluded with a special covenant meal in which animals were symbolically cut in half, symbolizing the shared responsibility of the two parties as well as the severity of the penalty for breaking the covenant. Then the parties to the covenant walked between the pieces, and then the meal was eaten together as a sign of friendship and alliance. Eating was understood to convey acceptance, to declare approval of those with whom one dined. Eating a formal meal with others was understood to demonstrate mutual agreement, cooperation, acceptance, and respect. When it comes to the meal, I recall Jesus' ministry with sinners. Jesus enjoyed the meal with the tax collectors and sinners. It was regarded by many in His day as an act of acceptance of their life. You also remember the miracle in Cana. Yes, changing water into wine in wedding banquet at Cana, Jesus reveals His messianic identity, who will make new covenant with true Israelite. Who makes this covenant between the people and God? Please read verse 8. This covenant is essentially not a matter of a mutual agreement or pact made between God and the Israelites. Bible declares the covenant that the Lord has made with you. God is the instigator, initiator. The covenant is by His initiative. What the Israelites are to do is to accept and agree to live by the terms of the covenant. Israel's choice was never between making a covenant either with other gods or with Yahweh, but Between making a covenant with other gods or accepting the covenant Yahweh graciously, mercifully, lovingly made with them. It is time to summarize and apply it to our life. Point to ponder. The covenant confirmed by the blood. This covenant is essentially not a matter of a mutual agreement or a pact made between God and the Israelites. God is the instigator. It is by his initiative. First to remember, Exodus chapter 24, verse 8. Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, Behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Questions to consider. What kinds of promises have God made to you? Has He been faithful to keep them? How could you respond to His faithfulness?